I'm always sort of trying to remind folks, the reason I'm so invested in women as a category is we're half the population. And within that population is every other marginalized group of people. If you can solve this sort of challenge of dividing us all, if you can bring women together, if you can figure out how to build solidarity amongst women, that is far more than half the battles that we are all fighting. And so from my own life and into sort of the imaginary life I want to help create, there is this sort of core thought that, your problems are my problems and mine are yours, and we are in this together. That is the right and natural way of the world, how I see it. It is not rugged individualism. It is that we are connected.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of The Deeper Pulse. So this week, rather than clogging up the airways with a long meandering monologue, you know how I do, we're going to just dive right in to today's content because the conversation I'm about to share with you really speaks for itself. It's a dialogue about what it means to build community in the face of crisis after crisis, about navigating dark times with a sense of hope and optimism, but not the fluffy sort, the kind that has legs. The sort of hope that enables us to keep moving and that empowers us to sit down with people who are different than us so that together we can challenge systems, reimagine and realize the world that we actually want to live in. A world where girls, women, and traditionally marginalized folks are not only represented, but are leading the charge toward change that is inclusive, nonpartisan, and lasting. Speaking of, women have been fighting the good fight behind the scenes and on the front lines for decades. For example, in this episode, you'll hear reference to American labor leader Dolores Huerta, who once said, "Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person, a potential activist. Every minute, a chance to change the world." Huerta also coined the phrase "si se puede," or "yes, we can," which has been a collective cry of labor organizers since 1965. And at 95 years of age, she's still at it, showing up in multi-generational cross-cultural collaboration with community organizers of all ages, identities, and political persuasions. Huerta is living proof that effective movements, well, they keep on moving. Because the aim isn't tied to any single leader. Devotion to the cause of justice should be bigger than any one of us, if it's to be in service to all of us. So today's episode is dedicated to all the organizers and activists whose shoulders we stand on, especially to those who have labored invisibly behind the scenes, whose contributions have been overlooked, ignored, or in some cases, purposefully erased. And over the course of this delightful and candid conversation, today's guest reminds us that meaningful, lasting change happens when we all come together, however messy and imperfect it might look, in solidarity to make things better for the next generation. Darcy Totten serves as the executive director at the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. She has over 20 years of experience in crisis communications, journalism, public policy, and external affairs. Darcy has built nationally recognized efforts while at the Commission, including authoring the Commission's award-winning original research report, the California Women's Economic Blueprint for Pandemic Recovery, and the #WomenAreEssential campaign, highlighting the role of women as essential workers in California's economy. She's an expert in social impact strategies, issue advocacy, crisis communications, and gender-focused public policy. She's passionate about coalition building and working with intersectional and inclusive teams that prioritize historically marginalized communities. Darcy holds a bachelor's degree from Mills College in studio art and visual communication and a master's degree in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin. She lives in Sacramento with her wife Jasper and too many cats. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. You're in for a real treat. Here's my conversation with Darcy Totten.
I cannot seem to get the light to stay on.
You're definitely creating a vibe in the room with the lighting.
This is my like standard vibe. This is how it is.
I dig it.
I do all the like really, really bureaucratic stuff in an office with fluorescent lighting. So all the good creative work happens at home.
I love it. I love it so much. I just happen to have a desk that faces a window, so I get all the natural light. That's my trick.
There's a window right in front of me, but I'm such a nerd about things like this. Our neighbors let their tree like grow onto our roof, and it drives my partner absolutely nuts. And I love it, and I never let her cut it back. And then, of course, in the winter, it's like pitch black in here at 10 in the morning.
Right.
But I love it. And all the little animals come, and like the neighborhood cats cruise. It's like there's a whole soap opera like right in front of my desk.
That's fabulous. So it's like a little cocoon all around you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the house was built in the 1940s. It's cottage vibes, right? Like it is full on cat lady cottage lesbian with clutter and books and art and like records everywhere. It is exactly who I thought I would be when I was like 13 when I grew up.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that so much. And we will touch upon some of that for sure today. I'm just like so deeply grateful that you agreed to do this, Darcy. I admire you a lot. The work that you do, the talk that I saw you give at the Women in Leadership Conference, and then following you on LinkedIn and just seeing everything that you're involved with. It's just, you're really an inspiration and you're a motivator during these crazy times. And it's just truly an honor to sit down with you and share you with the podcast listeners.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I sort of feel the same way about what you're doing with this podcast. Like you're just bringing really bright spots to people in a really dark time. And I'm so honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we're all doing what we can, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is doing what we can. So if you would, I know a little bit about you, but would you introduce yourself to listeners and tell them about the work that you do presently?
Sure. So my name is Darcy Totten. I am the executive director for the California State Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. The commission's been around since 1965. We were made an independent state agency in 1971. There's a little lore there, but the important part is that we were collectively created by both Democrats and Republicans. So we are nonpartisan, which in this particular moment feels important to point out that women's issues are nonpartisan.
Yes.
And we have grown astronomically, and I'm really, really excited about that. That we went from being sort of a small advisory commission in 1965, full of mostly men, that was designed to kind of help figure out what to do about the fact that all these women suddenly wanted, jobs and equal pay, to co-sponsoring some of the most impressive gender equity legislation in the nation, running massive grant programs that measurably change the lives for women and girls in the state, and really just continually being at the forefront with incredible partners like, at the moment, first partner, Jen Siebel-Newsom, who is a huge champion for women's rights, but historically also with First Lady Maria Shriver, with the California Legislative Women's Caucus that has radically expanded in recent years. We are almost to parity in the state legislature.
Wow, that's awesome.
Although, let's be real, I am not a big fan of proposing that we need to fight for parity. I don't think we should stop at half. Mm-hmm. I think that's an artificial limitation on women that we should not be placing on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. We've had all male everything forever. There's no reason to only say that we want half.
That's right.
We want as many qualified people as possible everywhere.
100%.
So that's what I do now. And, our staff has grown hugely, which is really exciting. It means we can take on more projects. This is sort of an unusual job for me, and actually I think for a lot of people in this kind of era, because I've grown up with it. So I started in 2019. I did crisis management, crisis communications, and I worked for associations, and I, was dabbling in federal lobbying and just sort of playing around in all these different sandboxes, trying to figure out how I was going to transition my life from what I grew up thinking it would be to what now felt really possible. And I just got so burnt out. I did what a lot of women do, which is I just sort of thought that if I worked harder than everybody else, I would eventually figure out how to make money and have security and do all that, right? And instead what happened was I burnt myself out, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And by the last time, it was 2019, and I just said, enough. I'm not doing this anymore. Closed up shop, folded the business, and was looking around for, okay, I have a little money saved. What am I going to do next? Started thinking I'd write a book, but I fairly quickly thereafter was hired as the communications director for this commission. And they had never had one before. And the executive director and I knew each other. And she was like, hey, we're doing this really big, really intense program to bring medication abortion techniques to all the UCs and CSUs. And as you can imagine, it's a bit of a crisis. And I need someone with that experience who's willing to work for, government money. And I just said, do I have to work on weekends? And will you ever call me on Christmas? She said, no. I said, great. That's my new job. I work for state now. Let's do this. And I was so excited. And of course, my first meeting was, there were like 100 people out the door, sort of with very big feelings about this program. And
sure,
I got introduced, and the person giving comment on the line was like, well, it said something horribly insulting. And, I don't even remember. And I just kind of went, yeah, I can do this. This is good. I know how to do this. This is fine. Everybody's looking terrified. No, we're good. And then I kind of grew up here. I became the director of external affairs. I managed some of our policy work. I wrote what ended up being the state's economic blueprint for pandemic recovery for women and girls, really focusing on kind of what happened to us as a workforce and how that impacted the state. And now I am the executive director building a team that I just could not be prouder of. We have some of the most incredible experts in state service from all different sort of areas, big agencies, other commissions, who are coming together because they believe in our mission, which is not always sort of what you get in government, right? You get people who believe sort of high level in public service. It's really an honor to get to lead a team that believes deeply in a much more narrow vision and focus around equity and around making sure that, America works for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of equity, I'm assuming that over the course of 60 years, the team that you have created now is much more diverse than in the past. Is that true, or
I don't think so, actually. I want to say that diversity in government is just it's so interesting. We've made a huge effort to build a diverse team. I think on paper, we are the most diverse team we've had yet. But there have been these moments in the commission's history. There's an ebb and a flow to sort of how government works, where it looks different, right? So for example, there was a moment where we were led entirely by women of color. And that's not currently the case. It's a little more spaced out, but we've added men and we've added folks with different sort of identity diversities, different histories. Mm-hmm. I've talked to some former executive directors about one of the sort of most interesting parts of this work for me is being somebody who has occupied different class strata in my life. And I am also a queer person. I'm very open about that. I am also white presenting, which is sort of an interesting lens on the world and on privilege and on racial privilege in particular. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of the things that we've really done a great job of in recent years is focusing on diversity as just a baseline starting strength. We just assume that that's going to help us, that the more sort of perspectives in the room, the better, and the more effective we'll be. And we kind of just, it's now just kind of part of like the air we breathe. That's part of how we think about this work.
Sure.
And it's funny, I always find it a little jarring when I talk to people about feminism or women's rights or gender equity in general, the way that people sort of get a little startled by that approach, right? And I'm always sort of trying to remind folks, the reason I'm so invested in women as a category is we're half the population. And within that population is every other marginalized group of people. Mm-hmm. If you can solve this sort of challenge dividing us all, if you can bring women together, if you can figure out how to build solidarity amongst women, that is far more than half the battles that we are all fighting.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And I'm like pulling that thread together with something you said a little bit earlier when you spoke about first showing up in your organization and the line out the door and the conflicting viewpoints and your ability to sort of maintain a sense of center in crisis. Like that was kind of what you had come, the skill set you had brought into it.
Mhm.
And I know, having talked to you before and heard you speak before, that there's a little bit of a backstory to that, like why it is that Darcy is so equipped when it comes to crisis and inclusion and diversity and what that means. And if you're comfortable sharing a little bit of your backstory with folks, because I think it's super informative and it gives us a peek at, I don't know. I just think so many of these concepts like diversity and inclusion and collaboration, all these things, they're so high-minded. And when
Mhm.
I hear you speak about your personal history and how it guides your philosophy around leadership,
Yeah.
it's the opposite of high-minded. It's gritty, it's real, it's earthy,
Really
and that's
pretty.
what I love though, Darcy. That's what I was so drawn to you more than any other speaker, quite frankly, at the conference, because you brought something so real and really relatable to me. So share with us your story a little
Sure.
bit.
Well, I'll start with this. It's sort of a deep part of my ethos to show up honestly. I believe that there was a time where women had to not do that. Women in particular had to be very careful what sort of
Sure.
persona they brought to the workplace. And one of the most important things that I think I get to bring now is showing up as my full self and sort of telling these stories, being who I am and still being a leader,
Mm-hmm.
which is nothing I ever thought. Like it is a word that it's still trip on it a little when it comes out of my mouth when it applies to me. Um, so yeah, so I grew up in Sacramento. I grew up in a really nice part of Sacramento. If you were to go back even further, though, I was in foster care until I was about 2.5, 3 years old. I was a baby adoptee. So my birth family is in my life. I know my mom, and she came from a place that mostly in government we just talk about as statistics, right? She's not the kind of person who ever shows up to testify in a committee hearing or that lawmakers get to hear from. And I am very blessed to know her and to have known her pretty much my whole life. We met when I was 18.
Okay.
But I was taken by Child Protective Services, put in foster care as an infant. She had a pretty serious drug problem. And I was adopted by a white family. This is for my mom's Creole, by a white family who lived in the suburbs and raised me in like Fair Oaks, California, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a very fancy part of the suburbs of Sacramento. I grew up basically down the street from where the governor has a house now.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, of course, none of that was there. It was horse pastures and like old dudes with motorcycles. But it's a very nice part of California. And around 14, I came out of the closet. It was 1994, 95. I don't remember. Early 90s, mid 90s. And my mother, former chair of her college Young Republicans Club, absolutely could not handle it. My father was incredibly supportive. He was like an aging punk and like a wild liberal, and they found each other, and they have like a whole amazing love story.
Interesting. Yeah.
But something about me coming out so young triggered her really, and we were pretty quickly off to the races. It was violent, it was difficult, a lot of really sort of immediate sort of punishing societal things happened to me that I also sort of we didn't have language for as women, right? Like I was, almost 40 before I could sort of like use the sexual assault survivor language for myself for things that at the time were just like what happens when you're a kid that nobody's watching, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of my biggest frustrations about hearing some of the language now about sort of child sexual assault victims being called not really children because they're teenagers. I'm like, no, those were kids. I was a kid. Lots of us were kids.
Yeah.
And, the process of that was all tied to being out as a queer person. And I didn't even totally know what that meant yet. I knew I was the only one I knew, and that we weren't in movies yet. We weren't on TV, really. We weren't in books. It wasn't a thing anybody talked about. There was this like one crystal-y, like sage burning new age bookstore down the road that had a shelf in the back behind a curtain, bottom shelf with 5 gay books. And they were all about men. And I read all of them in the corner because I couldn't buy them and I couldn't take them home. But hard as I tried, the way that worked is I was in and out of my house. So I became, I guess, what we would call housing insecure. I was not completely homeless, but I was, on any given week, I was ordered out and couldn't come back. And I would have to figure out where to stay, how to feed myself, all that, right? So I became really self-reliant really, really early. And it kind of just got worse until the end of high school, at which point my mom was like, I have to tell my friends something. So I'll co-sign on a loan for you. You go to college and then just don't come back. And that was the deal. And I thought I'd never be in Sacramento again.
Wow.
So I took all the money I could get. I went to Mills College, which is a very expensive private school that I was still paying for, that was worth every penny. And then I went to graduate school at the University of Texas just to see the other side of things, where I got my very first government job working for a Republican administration as a fellow. And like I could write a book about the things I learned just in that short period of time. But I guess the biggest one is I walked in and said, I'm all of these things that you people hate. And they were like, we don't hate you. We're glad you're here. We picked you. Do you want the job or not? We're going to pay you. And I was like, yeah, I could use the money. Yes, I love the job. And a bunch of people I thought I was mortal enemies with taught me politics and were kind to me and still inspire me now.
Wow.
So that was an amazing introduction to politics. But it sort of didn't stick. My father got sick. He got cancer. I came back to Sacramento. I got special dispensation to come home, take care of him. He died. And when that happened, my mom and I started to thaw a little bit. Not enough for me to stay. I ran off to New York, met a, amazing musician, married the gay rock star, and did all the things. And, throughout all of that, I was always sort of on my own, right? And it was still an era where people got fired for being queer. Wearing it visibly was part of your ethos. It was part of your politics. It became part of your safety, right? And like pink spiky hair and all the things. And I couldn't get an office job after that one in Texas, right? Like I went from a government job to like promoting parties in New York City and living a little bit like bohemian lifestyle, right? Lots of unheated warehouses with 11 roommates in one bathroom, kind of a vibe. And like well into adulthood, right? I think I was 29 when we left New York. And my whole life, I never thought I would have things like a career or stability, because that wasn't something queer people got, right? Like we got murdered. We got vigils that got protested by the Phelps family, right? We just, it was violent. And it's so hard to explain to queer folks now, because we did such a good job changing the culture for young queer people now.
That's right.
But at the time, I mean, it was just leaving the house meant you might be like in a fight with somebody 3 times your age at any given point, right? It was a rough time. And, I did a lot of organizing around that and a lot of sort of political work, but always from the perspective of an underdog that would probably always lose. Like I just never saw a future. And then, so the story I usually tell is about sort of the power of policy and the power of paperwork and the power of changing systems. Because at some point in there, then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom issues a whole bunch of marriage licenses in violation at the time, I think, of state and federal law. And we all watched it on TV and we kind of went, huh, weird.
Yeah.
They're going to let some of us get married. Nobody had ever considered that would ever be an option, much less like a big public thing, right? And it's just paperwork. It's a form. It's licenses. It's bureaucracy. It's something for someone to stamp, right? Mm-hmm. Doing that changed the entire world in such a short period of time. Everything sped up. The whole country suddenly knew that people like me and my friends existed and that we wanted to live our lives right next to them with all the same opportunities. And suddenly it happened. And suddenly it was illegal to fire us for being gay. And I could like get a job and be sure I'd keep it. And I kind of started looking around going, I got 2 degrees. I'm pretty smart. I could do stuff. Wow, let's do stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was trial and error, because while I had all the degrees, I had 0 social skills for working in cubicles and didn't know how any of that worked, because I had been raised by glitter wolves and like a total parallel system.
Glitter wolves.
I mean, that's kind of like, that is what happens when you throw out all the queer people and they raise each other, right? Like we built our own world. Yeah. We had our own parallel economy, justice system, you name it. It took a long time to adapt to how everybody else lived. Mm-hmm. And as a result, now in the work I get to do, I find it fairly easy to toggle back and forth between sort of what the room is assuming everyone feels or thinks and a bird's eye view of thinking, well, what about this? Or who's missing? Or maybe that's not the only perspective. And I find that incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. And building community, like you, for the sake of survival, we're relying on your community. And the word community, I think, means very different things to different people based on their lived experience, right? It's just such a subjective definition because of how we have or have not experienced what community means and how it collides with crisis and creates a depth of community that I feel like you bring into leadership. That's one of the reasons I find you so fascinating and inspiring, is that you had this experience of being, rejected and marginalized and creating this world to sustain yourself with other people outside of the mainstream. And yet you entered into, and maybe it was this pivotal experience you had in Texas, being able to work across the aisle, as they say, and make room for all these different perspectives. Like, what do you think it takes to do that? Because I think right now we should spend a little time on this, because I think this is something that folks are struggling with a lot right now. And this is what you do day in and day out, is attempting to bridge those divides. What do you have to say about that?
There's so many pieces to that. So the first one is sort of the story I just told, right? That I became aware, acutely aware, that if you change systems, you can change people. That the average person approaches the problem of like social bias, I think, backwards. We assume that you have to change someone's mind, you have to change their hearts and minds, and then you get better policy. And it turned out that if you got better policy, people changed their minds fairly simply. That if you simply were able to say, the structure is now different, people are incredibly adaptable. Yes. 5 years later, I had rights no one ever dreamed of. I had a life. I own a house. Who am I? I have slept in cars. I have slept on park benches. I own a home. Right. Unbelievable. In the city where I thought I would never be again. Actually, I live in Sacramento again. It was sort of the end of that story. My mother also eventually got sick, and I moved home and took care of her for the last year of her life. So we did get there's sort of a happy ending to that story. We did actually eventually kind of come together, and she, by the end of it, fell absolutely in love with my wife and insisted on throwing us a wedding while she was alive to see it in our backyard.
Oh, Darcy, that's beautiful.
It was amazing. And it was just before it became legal. So we did another one later, but it was incredible. And she invited all the neighbors and all the people that she used to be sort of embarrassed to know that I existed.
Making repairs right there. Yeah.
It was incredible. So some of it is the systems change piece. And I had a glimpse of that in Texas, right? About how policy worked, and policy could change big systems. Some of it is that I had all of these incredible sort of women who were my heroes, who treated political difference like any other difference, like a thing you could joke about or argue about, but that didn't fundamentally undo somebody's humanity. And I think that the environment has shifted a little, right? It is a lot harder to do that with somebody who believes that you should not exist. Sure. But it gave me a little bit of background. And that is one of the things I have always loved and admired about Texas women, right? Ann Richards and Molly Ivins, and these sort of staunch advocates for equity and things I believe in, but who were more than happy to sit down and smoke a cigar and have a bourbon with a guy who absolutely thought they were wrong about everything and just figure it out. Yeah. And I, sort of adopted that similar approach. Not so much the cigars. Not anymore. But also I think that some other piece of this is there's kind of a weird superpower to being someone who blends in, who has a really different experience from other people in the room. So I was just at a dinner, this incredible meal with all of these wonderful women leaders, and they're venture capitalists and they're tech CEOs. And I'm sure there was an heiress in there somewhere, right? They're just big, impressive, we run the world, sort of well-moneyed women. And I am, I'm never going to be fully comfortable there, but I'm more comfortable, right? And everybody's a person. So I'm chatting, we're finding what we have in common. We're like arguing about how to get more women into sort of wealth building spaces. And it is hot. And I am of an age where now I am sometimes unbearably hot. So I lose the jacket. And it was, you clock it a little bit when you've lived through a lot of trauma, that hypervigilance sort of kicks in. And I watched 6 women go straight to my tattoos, none of which are particularly pretty, right? Like they mark from whence I came.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's that moment where people are sort of like, how did you get here? Do you belong here? And one of the things that I sort of love about that is I can tell stories. And by the end of the story of like how this ink got here, right? This is like my whole arm is covered with sort of markers of my parents and sort of who did them and sort of what it meant, right? Like the first one's actually a really beautiful story about a woman who just held me while I cried after my dad died and like did it in a weird position where she was actually just holding me like a baby.
Oh, wow.
It was such a gift for somebody grieving who didn't get held like that.
That's right.
And by the end of it, it was wonderful. It was bonding. It was a connector instead of a thing that made me different. But what gets it there is me, right? Like I could have gotten all shrunk down and uncomfortable and made up all these stories in my head about feeling judged or feeling like I would never fit in here, right? And some of it is you just have to sort of be brave enough to be like, I am nothing like you. We are very different. That's okay. I still like you. I bet you still like me.
Yeah.
You have to give people space to be their best selves.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that really stuck with me in the talk that you gave, it feels thematic whenever I speak with you, are these 2 words. Outlast them.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that needs to be a tattoo on my arm, quite frankly. But like, I mean, there's different contexts in which we would use that phrase and what we would mean by it. But in this instance, it feels like it's connected to the next question I was going to ask you, which is what you perceive power to be.
Yes.
And when you talk about showing up in that moment, I feel like it's maybe connected to your answer. I don't want to assume anything, but I'm going to let you take it from here.
Yeah. I mean, well, so everybody has superpowers, and mine is that it is the tenacity to outlast everybody who has ever gotten up and gotten in my way and said, you cannot do this, you cannot have this, you cannot be this. And sometimes they have been able to prevent that for some short period of time, but I have outlived or outlasted every last one of them. So what I know for sure now is they're wrong. That's it. Full stop. They're wrong. And if they're wrong for me, they're probably wrong for anybody else. It is possible to outlast the people who tell you no. And when I think about power, it's funny. I think about power a lot, actually, because it is the thing that is not shared. It is a thing that is usually the biggest barrier between people in my communities that I love and the things that would make their lives better or easier or more fair. And often people conflate power with things like position or title or money, resources. And it's true, power comes with all of those things. But power is also in collectives. Power is in collaboration. Power is in solidarity. There was this incredible night that I'll never forget, long ago and far away, right, in a different world. So we're hanging out like a bunch of rowdy queer kids in the Mission District, right? I don't even remember how old I was. And at the time, that was kind of like inviting a fight a little bit, just the stoop we were on and the sort of amount of space we were taking up. Sooner or later, somebody was going to come tell us to like disappear. And we knew that. And, at the time there was a lot of sort of very gendered presentation. I had very short hair and very tough in my leather jacket and scrappy. So there's a bunch of us sort of very masculine presenting and one hyper femme woman with us, like a corset or something. And a bunch of dudes walked by and just started harassing her. And it was like a switch flipped. Nobody wanted to get in a fight about it. Everybody was just funny and sarcastic. And I just remember being part of this group of like beautiful queer women chasing these guys down the street, catcalling them and telling them how good they looked in their jeans. And they'd be much prettier if they smiled more. And they were terrified. It's like the scariest I've ever been. And it was such I normally hate the word empowering, but it was such an empowering sort of moment for me to understand that there are more avenues to power than like direct application of such, right? That you can suck the air out of a room with a joke, right? That's power. You
That's
can
true.
convince people who were sure that they hated you that maybe they actually could put up with you. That's also power, right? That there's lots of power, and that in groups of people who think they have no power, or people who often have no access to institutional systemic power, people with no resources, people without that money or those titles, as a group, they have a lot of power, right? That is, labor unions are built on that. Huge movements, social movements are built on that. The concept of collective power, of sharing our hope and our desire for a better collective future, that's power. Collective imagination is power. And it's one that we ignore all the time, which just baffles me because it's, I think, the most powerful. If you can be the group of people or the person in the group of people who envision what the world looks like 20 years from now, the amount of power contained in the ability to conceive of that and then make it happen,
Yeah.
it's incredible, right? Like being able
Yeah.
to pull yourself out of the immediate survival and say, okay, what's this? A lot of people are really scared right now, right? Things that they have counted on, they're sort of crumbling. Even I'm watching folks absolutely coming for rights that I was delighted to get and never thought I'd have, right? And also, I'm fully secure in my capacity to survive without those rights. I just don't want to. I'm very comfortable. I'm old now. I have older knees. My stoop sitting days are over, and I will fight to keep them. But at the same time, what's so important is, okay, what do I want the world to look like when we're done tearing it all apart? Sometimes you have to do that, right? Like, see, you tear through the house and throw everything out, and then later you regret some of what you're missing, but also it's clean. You start over. I'm a person who's picked up and moved to a new city with a trash bag full of things, mostly clothes, more than once in my life. Starting over is also power. The ability to just reinvent not just yourself, but the world you live in. Because that sort of reinforces that it doesn't have to be however it is. There is a world where women run absolutely everything. There is a world where, having a female president or a female governor is not even remotely surprising. There's a world where, Black women aren't leaving the workforce in droves because they're being forced out. Instead, they're running all of these new tech companies, and their collective understanding of the world and imagination is what's driving our algorithms, not four white dudes in hoodies, right? Like there are whole ways that the world could be. And if we can kind of harness that, not just hoping for it, but harness sort of the collective consciousness about what is possible, we can make that happen.
Yeah. I love this collective imagination piece. And as you're speaking about it, I'm thinking, well, isn't that really what good policy work relies on? Right?
Yeah.
I never really thought about it that way, but it makes so much sense that it's such a huge part of the work that you do as a coalition. And, you know, I'm thinking, because I am studying organizational leadership and I'm taking a critical perspective, and it really is all about dismantling, deconstructing, pulling it all down. And that working in cooperation with what you're describing is the secret sauce, I feel like. The two things happening alongside each other. And we need people like you helping us to actualize the collective imagination. And I feel like that's where I get a little stumped. And I think if like a zoom way into just my more immediate life in the little town that I live in, which is a little red state town, that I feel sort of alien in, to be perfectly honest, but I do my best to make connections, and I've learned a lot. That's the beauty of speaking to all of you listeners out there who live in a bubble of community where everyone is really similar to you. There's something really nurturing and wonderful about that. But being placed in an environment where you are the record scratch moment, just by virtue of being who you are, it also is very formative. And I think it does help to, there's something about the dissonance that actually feeds the imagination, because it helps you to see there's a lot of different perspectives here that we have to figure out how to come together. What do you think about pragmatizing that, whether it's in your organization or in individuals' everyday lives? Like, what does that look like?
So it always comes full circle back to that community piece for me, right? And one of the most interesting things I've learned working in government instead of outside for it to change is how revolutionary to this system things I thought of as just sort of baseline survival strategies are. So the standard answer if you want a government agency to do a thing it doesn't do is, well, we don't have the money, right? Like, and that's usually true. They usually don't have the money. So I kind of came in and somewhere in my journey, the commission was like, what if we did XYZ? And the answer is, well, we don't have any funding. And my answer was, we don't need money. And everybody kind of stared at me. But that's the truth, right? The same way that we do anything is how we get things done. We have partners. We can trade. We work on the barter system, right? I don't have any money, but I can, talk to you about something you want to change in the world. I can elevate this issue.
Yeah.
Do you have money? No. Do you have space? Yes. Great. Now we're going to have a meeting. And so we actually sort of just did this recently that I'm really proud of this. There are city and county women's commissions, and they're all sort of independent of each other. They all popped up at different times. They have different sort of rules and structures of how they get created. One thing that they all have in common is almost none of them have enough money. They're not well funded. And for the first time, as far as we can tell, since this commission was established, we just convened them all in LA. So we invited every single one of them to the table to have a set of conversations, in part to celebrate our 60th anniversary. We did it in partnership with the LA County Commission, which is one of the longest running sort of older ones. They turned 50 this year. So we partnered with them. And we have a longstanding partnership with Mount St. Mary's University, which is a private women's college in Los Angeles with like a deep underpinning of social justice at its core. So we also have a relationship with them, an MOU I built years ago. So I called them up and said, can we host all these people on your campus? Will you help us make sure that everybody gets like, coffee and some snacks in the morning? And LA figured out lunch, and we figured out programming, and we brought in all of the people we work with, incredible researchers, folks from Equal Rights Advocates, the National Partnership for Women and Families, Hospitality Training Academy, professional, right? Like some of our grantees, brought in Dr. Deborah Eduardo, LA County Office of Education, right? The superintendent for the county, Madeline Denona from Gina Davis Institute. Just brought all of these leaders together to sort of share their data, share what they knew, have this collective convening. But we kept it really small. It wasn't a conference. It was, I think we kept it at 140 people. There were some travel delays. We got like 111 solid, committed folks who represented the depth and breadth of sort of embedded women's institutions in the state. And we put them all in breakout rooms. And we said, talk to each other. And then come back and tell the group what it is you are willing to show up for, what you want to work with each other on. And let's build a policy agenda that we all just agree we're going to work on together. We're going to show up for each other the same way that kid me on a bus showed up for the gay guy getting picked on in the back seat, even though I didn't know him. Like, how am I going to apply this sort of teenage me principle to government now? And we did it. And we have come up collaboratively, developed a women's statewide agenda for the next several years. We're going to be hosting 4 follow-up meetings on these topics that'll be open and on Zoom to everybody who was there, but also to all of their partners, their community organizations. And we kind of said, what are the things that we have to fix for gender equity in the state of California? And we got, the local commissions need a funding source, but we also got housing and pay equity and wealth building for women. We got product safety and women's health and the things that still aren't being handled there, career development for girls, support for survivors of human trafficking, kids in foster care, right? Like we got this incredibly large umbrella set of issues, with the idea being that when somebody runs a bill, somebody runs a fundraiser, somebody starts a program, somebody holds a conference, we now have this network, and all of these start small but mighty. But we have a network of women's commissions across the state who will show up for that other commission. They will show up for each other. And that is how you make change.
Yes. I love that so much. And
I'm
it's
so
easy.
excited.
I bet. It sounds thrilling. And it's not hard to see the parallels of how we could do that same kind of thing in our smaller communities.
Well, one of the things that was so powerful is the last time I had been at an event at Mount St. Mary's that we had something to do with was around the equal rights movement, and Dolores Huerta came, and it was like towards the last day, and we only had about 30 people there. And she showed up and she was like, this is how I started. You just get a bunch of women in a room around a table and see what they can do. This is what women are good at. And I really brought that with me a year later to this convening. And, you know, it was started out the day sort of disappointed. People couldn't get on their planes. There were travel delays. There were all these problems. And I kind of went, we're going to do it again and again and again. This is a stellar start. We had a bunch of women around a proverbial table in a room to roll up their sleeves and see what we can do. And the only thing we're going to do now is build bigger, longer, stronger tables and invite more of them to join us.
So what would you say to people who are like, Darcy, that sounds amazing, but I don't live in California. That kind of thing only happens in California.
Well, I want to give California credit. We do tend to start things. We do lead by example in ways that I think are really powerful, right? Our former Senator Hannah Beth Jackson authored the California Fair Pay Act. That is having its 10-year anniversary this year. And that's a model for equal pay legislation at the state level across the nation. I think 42 other states immediately copied it, right? California really does lead in this way. So I guess what I would say is, here's the model. This is the template. I will share with anybody the template for how to do anything, right? Like, you want my Mad Libs emails? Here you go. Let me show you how we built the website. I'll teach you WordPress, honestly, right? Like what do you need to replicate this? But then go replicate it, right? I think one of the biggest challenges is that we sort of live in an era where people, they want to push a button. They want to write a check, but they want someone else to do the thing. And at the end of the day, if you want to change something, you actually have to do the thing yourself and then with friends. And then you have to let other people do the thing differently than how you would do it. It's like you start it and then you have to let it go. That part's hard too, right? Like I want all those commissions to convene without me. I want them to have meetings that I'm not invited to someday. I don't want to be the thing around which it circles. I'm proud to have started it, and now I want it to go. And I'm going to steward it until it will do that without me. And then I'm going to start something else that needs doing, because that's kind of my energy, right? Is catalyzing things. And I think it's really important that women start thinking in those collective ways. I got a bunch of little glass bricks with my name on it, and that's nice. And I appreciate it every time that happens. And it's never the reason to do anything. But at the end of the day, the work is what's important. What's important is, did we build something that outlives us, that outlasts us? I want to build things that outlast me. And it's not even really a legacy issue, because I don't care if anybody remembers that it's mine. I just want it to work. I want to leave the world better for women and girls than I found it. And frankly, that's not that hard to do, because I didn't find it in great shape. So there's lots to do, and there's room for everybody to get in.
And I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because something that we talked about last time that really is going to land for the Deeper Pulse listeners in particular, because a lot of folks who listen to this podcast started tuning into it because they were, like me, sort of like apostates from the wellness world. And some are still, involved in certain ways, not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. However, I've voiced lots of critiques of that world on this podcast. And one of the things that came up in our conversation was we were talking about the wellness and self-care directive to turn our attention inward and to focus on like bettering ourselves, and that's the thing that's going to change the world, or that's the thing that we need to be doing. And while there is a time and place for that, there's a way in which that can be its own sort of smoke screen behind which things are happening. It can be a way to distract us from doing the grunt work. And I think there's a balance to be had there. And I want to hear your thoughts on that.
It's just part of a leadership development group, and we just had a session where I was holding forth on this exact topic, probably annoying at least half the room with it. But I feel strongly about this. And I want to also say, so I am not a wellness practitioner. I am married to one. And so I get sort of a lot of kind of outside perspective, but not from within it. So where I land with this is a couple of things. The first big one, there's a sales imperative to constantly convincing women in particular that they're broken and in need of healing. People make money off of that. And in addition to making money off of that, it serves the sort of added bonus of keeping you insecure, not confident in what you are able to do, and consistently trying to fix something about you that may or may not even be broken, or even giving you a self-concept of being broken. It also is culturally really American. It is deeply steeped in this sort of rugged individualism idea that it is you against the world and will always be so, and that is somehow the right and natural way of being, which is deeply disempowering and frankly designed to be disempowering. And it keeps people from accessing that lever of collective power. If you are all sure that you're supposed to individually be succeeding on your own and healing on your own and fixing things on your own, you're not spending a lot of time building that community that might have the power to change larger systems and circumstances. And it sort of feeds like a human impulse towards selfishness and self-absorption in a way that I don't particularly vibe with, right? Like my life has been saved by strangers more than 5 times. I haven't actually sat down and counted, but like the ones that are immediately, like multiple times, strangers have literally saved my life. Like a time I almost drowned, a thing at a party, right? Like people have taken care of me, and they're not the people you would think. They weren't immediate family, right? Like I got pneumonia once and was in real bad shape and couldn't go to a hospital and didn't have health insurance and didn't have any money. And the neighborhood drug dealer brought me antibiotics. Cool. I don't know him. I didn't know him. I've never seen him since. Nice guy. Not even sure how he found me, got to me, or knew I was there. Brilliant, right? And I was better. If you want a village, you have to be a villager. You have to show up. And what that means is the whole like messaging around sort of take your space, rest, right? You do have to do those things too, but you can't do them at the expense of other people, right? When you are tired and you had a long day at work and your neighbor needs help, you need to go help your neighbor, right? That like your friend having surgery and they need meals cooked for them, even though it is the worst possible time because it's over the holiday and you've got like, your kids and your ex's kids and everybody, right? And like you have all these things. Figure it out. DoorDash them something, right? Like you contribute what you can. We have got to pull ourselves out of this sort of individualistic thing. That humans aren't meant to live like that. We live in a society. We operate as groups. That is what the core of our humanity is steeped in. And so from my own life and into sort of the imaginary life I want to help create, there is this sort of core thought that, your problems are my problems and mine are yours, and we are in this together. That is the right and natural way of the world, how I see it. It is not rugged individualism. It is that we are connected.
Yes, I agree with everything you just said. And I would also say that it's important to flag in these wellness spaces, there can be sort of 2 ways that rugged individualism can present itself. One is the contraction into self-care, self-helping ourselves endlessly. And there's also the way the pendulum can swing in the other direction of, rather than just being a villager in the village who just shows up when the need is present, we become the identity of the healer, the person who's figured it out, who's dealt with their trauma, who's check the box, and is there to serve. But it's actually more about, in my opinion, the performance of being the person who serves than it is about being a part of the community. There's a hierarchical thing that just sort of happens.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I want to own that I've been that person.
I want to flag a gender perspective on this that I think is really important, right? We are one grandmother in to women having any remote expectation of a life even a little bit equal to a man's. That of a life of independence, a life with a career, a life with any sort of power over what happens to us, a life with our own money. One grandmother, right? Like we are one generation into this being possible for women in America, like one full generation. Yeah. And we've made huge strides in that time. But I do not want us to fault women for looking for toeholds that are considered socially acceptable to leadership and power. And the thing is, healing and wellness is a place historically that the men are like, you can have that. I won't take it from you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so women have built themselves whole industries there. They have,
Yeah.
right? But like when you, which is it, we talked about this a little bit, that like, you know, the self-help section of a bookstore should be titled leadership, except it's all for women,
Hmm.
right? Women are still sort of finding our way in terms of how we use power, how we collect it, how we build it. And we're still sort of teaching each other badly about how to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like we sort of talk about networking and using these sort of like old social climbing models
Yeah.
that were like deeply embedded with also sort of specific types of class and race sort of like social force. And one of the things that we're also seeing is sort of the way that women are encouraged to be caregivers, even when they have things that could give them power, right? Like we have more female billionaires now than ever. There's this stunning wealth transfer that has happened where women are like really wielding lots of wealth. And what we're watching them do is start foundations and give it away because that is a socially acceptable thing to do with money if you're female. I personally would like them all to pool their finances and buy all of the industries that are ruining our lives and then change them, because that's another way to change the world. But
Yeah.
we don't talk about that. And it's not polite to talk about money. And it's definitely not polite to tell other people what to do with their money, right? Like
Right.
there's all of these sort of restrictions
Mm-hmm.
that hobble our power. Men don't have that problem. Men have been sitting in back rooms telling each other what to do with their money for a long time.
Yeah.
We have to get more comfortable with power ourselves and with the sense that we might be judged for wanting it, taking it, using it, applying it.
That's fair.
Because you will be judged. People will judge you. That is just the reality, but also people will judge you no matter what. So at some point, you just have to kind of live your life.
Yeah.
And I think particularly in wellness spaces, again, it sort of feeds things that are expected of women. It is expected that we are sort of like small and injured and fragile and in need of outside help or outside saving or stuff, right? Like it feeds that kind of like princess in the tower narrative. And then you get all this empowerment messaging by like, I don't need that. I healed myself. And now I'm totally perfect and I can teach you how to be perfect. And it's like, well, no, that's also bad. Like, no, but
Yeah.
that's just fitness industry, like rejiggered with more soothing sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like a laundered
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
So some of it is we just have to let go of, we collectively, and particularly as women, we have to let go of this idea that we have to do or be anything at all other than what we want for ourselves and for each other. I promise I'm living proof. And it's one of the things I love to kind of run around in my new world, like in a suit, in capitals, having these conversations with people going, I promise you there's no rules, because I've lived on the other side where there weren't any rules or none of these rules applied. There's a whole capacity of the universe to adapt to what we want instead of us endlessly forcing ourselves to fit into what we've inherited as the right way to be.
Yes.
And so as a collective, as a collective of women, as a collective of sort of humanity, we kind of owe it to ourselves and to each other to just behave as though the world is whatever we want it to be. There, that's for the wellness community. That is actually how manifestation works, right? It's not that you say the magic words a million times in the mirror. It's that you adopt the energy of the thing you want to pull to you and it matches you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that works just as well for politics in terms of systems. That works for money, not in terms of bringing it to you, but in terms of how it operates, right? If an entire neighborhood simply adopts the idea that pooled money is a better way to be, well, then that's how money works in that neighborhood.
If they actualize that idea, that's a blind spot I see a lot in new age wellness spaces, though, is there's a lot of lip service.
Well, you got to make it real. You got to
make it real.
roll up the sleeves and get everybody around the table.
That's
to
the
do
thing
work,
you're saying. Like,
right?
yeah, you can't just
Yeah.
write it in your manifestation journal. You have to go out and get your hands dirty.
Well, in the same way, you can't just, yell at Congress or expect someone else to fix it, right? Like
That's
there
right.
is a core amount of community just being people who show up for each other and with each other to fix problems. That's some of why we adapted to living in large scale societies, is we can do that. Childcare is a great example. We talk about childcare all the time. There are not enough childcare slots. Women in the workforce are hurting always because there's not sort of an adaptation for childcare. And we tried really hard to sort of just convince men to do half, but they didn't. And, so we sort of looked at government and said, can you fix it? And government's like, no. And now we're having to look around and go, well, what are the other options? Right. And some of those other options, or the other option that has been in use since, time started, are friends and family networks, informal networks where communities care for each other's children. And also, it's overly burdensome, right? Some of the challenge is just, how do we do this so that it works for everybody, right? And then you just do it. You figure it out. We've seen great pilot projects in some communities that are helping women start home care businesses, right? So we have some counties in California that are really seeing massive drops in the need for childcare because so many women started home-based businesses, and they're culturally responsive, and they're safe, and they've been trained, and there's available childcare now. And the people providing it have a job that pays well, because normally providers don't get paid very well. But if you own the business, it's a little bit different, right? You can adjust for that, especially if it's home-based. So there's always a solution. Women have never, I don't know if you or your listeners have seen this speech. Reese Witherspoon gave some amazing speech at some award show that I cannot remember which one, but she was sort of talking about how much she hates in scripts and movies when the female character goes, oh no, what do we do?
Oh, yeah.
Never in history has a woman not known what to do, right? You just apply that to everything. You apply that to childcare. You apply it to grocery prices, right? Like, the amount of neighborhoods I'm seeing just near my own where everybody is sort of bartering on food, right? The chicken lady and the goat lady and the veggie lady have a trade going, and it's awesome, right? I don't know that we figured out how to make that real for everybody, but women figure it out, right?
Yes, we do.
We get things done, and there's just no reason to get in our own way because we're sure that we're not the right person. We're not healed enough. We're still too whatever. All that energy we spend on sort of healing our collective trauma, it's important to heal, but it is also important to understand that sometimes one of the most healing things you can do is change the world so that the cause of your hurt doesn't exist for anybody else anymore.
Yeah, one of the things you said in our last conversation that sort of feels like it underscores all of this is I asked, about what everyday people can do starting now. And the first thing you said was stop waiting for instructions.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Nobody is coming with a worksheet. Figure out.
Exactly. And that circles us all the way back to the beginning. And like when you have lived experience where you have no choice, you can't, nobody's going to give you the instructions. There's nobody to even ask. The instructions maybe don't even exist, which is often the case, but we actually know what we in our communities need. We're not at a loss.
Well, and so there's two things I want women to let go of, and it might sound a little strange, but embarrassment, right? And this sense of fear of making mistakes. Like, I want women to get so comfortable screwing up in public. And everybody sort of says, yeah. But I mean, in public, when the stakes are high, right? I talk about my mistakes because I think it's important to share that you can make them and still do things that you want. It doesn't end you. It's not, right? And yes, you get judged, and yes, people are mean, and yes, people are petty. And also, you get to learn from them, and then you are that much better at whatever the thing is you're trying to do. But we have got to give ourselves and each other permission to screw up and keep going. More and more. That is how every business owner who built something out of nothing did it. They screwed up and kept going. That is how politicians get made. It's how policy gets made. It is how the world changes, is that you cannot sort of be afraid to act in case you make a mistake. You have to act and make the mistake and then keep acting. And when you make a mistake, you have to be able to say, whoops, I got that wrong. I'm sorry. Let me repair that. And it gets folded in. And I think so many women, again, one grandmother in, so many women are really living with this overly burdensome idea that they have to be perfect, that they have to get it right every time, that they cannot ever show weakness. And there's good reason for that. I also don't want to discount that, right? There are lots of women who've been thrown out. They've been blackballed. They've been sort of stopped from doing the things they want. And also, The world has changed. Look around. Lots of men are making lots of public mistakes. Go ahead, take that liberty for yourself and change the world. I always tell young women that I'm mentoring, you will have so many men in charge of your life who don't know what they are doing, and they're going to be making 3 times the salary that you are. And at some point, you just have to be like, you know what? It's my turn. I am not deferring to somebody else's sort of iterative learning process anymore. I'm going to start my own.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be anybody or not to do that, right? Like I am naturally sort of like loud and big. And also you don't have to be that either. You know, some of the most powerful women in my sort of kitchen cabinet, like my personal advisory board of people that I keep around who tell me when I'm definitely screwing up, are incredibly quiet and incredibly introverted and very, very sort of hard to draw out. And yet when they speak, people listen. They carry themselves with authority. They have the weight of knowing what they know and the courage of their convictions, and they stand by those things. You don't have to be any personality type to do what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like caring out loud, you know? I mean, and we all show that differently. We all show up differently. My person, you know, it's like I have my partner and then I have my person, like my bestie of many years. And she's one of those people who doesn't take up a lot of space, doesn't speak a lot. But when she's ready to talk, I'm like, everybody zip it.
Yeah.
Because I know the potency of what's getting ready to come out of this person's mouth is something we're all going to want to hear, you know? And sometimes that pregnant space that gets created by the people who aren't as vivacious as Darcy and I, who have all kinds of things to say all the time, that creates a different kind of possibility. And it's just as important. So I think I appreciate you underscoring that because I think it's essential.
The last thing that I just want to say is that is so important is we're so new into possibilities for women, right? And it doesn't feel that way for a lot of us, right? A lot of us, millennials and sort of younger, grew up with some amount of expectation of that. And a lot were sort of stifled by the women who just squeaked in before them, and they have lots of sort of like feelings there. So the thing I want to just encourage women in particular to do is to say each other's names in rooms they're not in, to bring each other with them, to stifle the urge in yourself to gatekeep or to say this is my space or I own this piece and you can't have it. We have to stop competing with each other. There is always going to be room for more of us. We don't take up nearly the space we collectively could. You're not going to lose your spot. You're not going to lose what you worked for. You've got to bring other folks in. And so one of the things I'm really intentional about, right, is if I'm in a conversation, I've actually had several of those this week where somebody's kind of like, what do we do about the thing? And I have an idea. I will give my idea, and then I will also give the names of 1 or 2 or 3 other women I know who either have a different perspective, have a piece of it, know how to solve some chunk of the problem. And I'm immediately putting people together, right? Like I want to build this certification program. Great. It's going to be you, but also all of you over here. Do you want in on this? Right. I'm the first person to make a phone call saying, who wants to be part of this thing? Yes, everybody put your name on it. The sort of sense of working together is foreign to a lot of spaces that I now move in. People are suspicious of it. Sometimes they get nervous about it. Sometimes there are 2-hour meetings about whose logo goes where, right? Like it happens. But you just keep pushing on, right? Like you let it happen because it hasn't happened in those spaces before. And that is one of the things that I hope I get to contribute is this idea that we can collectively do more if we work together. And I hope that that outlasts me long, long after this isn't what I do for a living, or am not living, right? Like I want that to be a true thing. And it's so interesting to also just a little bit about kindness, right? There's a kindness that comes with that. I wrote that memoir. I just finished it and I've been looking for publishers. And so the query letter process, if you've ever written a book, is just terrifying, right? Like you give them all your stats, you tell them how to sell, your story, and then you send these letters and then they send back, no, thank you. You get the rejection. So, but I want to give this woman credit. I just got the sweetest, kindest rejection letter I've ever gotten in my life. And I printed it. I saved it because it was such a wonderful no. And I want to use that as a model for when I have to tell people no, right? And it wasn't the sandwich. It wasn't like compliment, no compliment. It was a well thought out sort of like, this just doesn't resonate with me. I don't have any connection to the story you're telling. So I'm the wrong person to sell it. Good luck. And I was like, yeah, it's honest. It's kind. It's real. It doesn't feel fake. I don't feel catered to or fluffed. Like, this is how I want to learn how to, right? So I have now learned something from this woman I'm probably never going to meet about how to say no. I am so grateful for it.
Yeah.
And someday when I find the person who is going to publish this book, I'm still going to keep the no letter up, because it is just as important as whoever eventually does say yes.
Yeah. And well, I can't wait to read it. First of all, I will be.
We got to find somebody who wants it, but someday
it's got to happen because I want to read it
someday.
And I think though, which sort of touches upon everything you're saying, is that we have to be willing to go through this awkward phase of figuring out how to do all of this differently because we haven't done this before. And so it's going to be awkward. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have to call each other out in ways that are kind and honest and true. We're figuring this out together. Yeah. And I am just hearing you say that the more we show up, the more we have models to look toward, like this woman who wrote this letter. And
we just have to do that for each other. And then also understand that, like, absolutely nothing about hierarchical systems built for men designed to exclude most people is going to benefit us collectively if we try and model our own new world off of that, right? Like, it benefited everybody it was supposed to.
That part.
Right now, this moment, this is the result of that model. Right? We have done a full test of that model. We gave it a solid 250 years. This is what you get with that model. Do we want to keep the model? Is it working? Do you feel like you are served by this model? And my guess is all the people who are in their mind being like, maybe not, simply do not yet understand that the only thing between their life and a new model is them being like, yeah, no, let's do it different. And then just doing it different, right? Like, so much of what I learned how to do as a kid is it's forgiveness, not permission, right? Yep. You just do it differently until someone makes you stop, and then you figure it out.
And then you outlast them.
And then you outlast them.
That seems like the perfect place to end, right?
There we go.
We said there was no formula, but there you have it. That's as close as we're going to get.
Perfect.
This has been so great, Darcy. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I just so appreciate the work that you're doing. And when I say you, I mean just everybody that you work with in partnership, everyone that is coming together to make these possibilities real in our lives, to actualize the collective imagination. And many of us, we lay in our beds at night, maybe fretting over the news or this and that. And what are we really doing? We're hoping for something different, and we're imagining something different. If we can focus on that part and contribute to collectives like in the way that you're doing, and use what you're all doing as a model, it just gives me a tremendous amount of hope. I like to say hope is a verb, and I feel like you're verbing it. You're making hope real in the lives of so many people, and I'm so grateful.
You. I mean, I need to acknowledge that I am one of so many people doing all of it. Like, I am a piece of a collective, right? Mm-hmm. If you get a chance, go check out our website. We've just put up a new piece of it where actually if you portal in through the part about our 60th anniversary, you can see a list of every woman who's ever served on this commission. We're trying to add all the EDs as well. But it's an impressive list. But the thing that I love about it is they cycle through, right? Like, it is a collective effort over decades to build a thing that is designed to move the needle on change. It is the smallest piece of a big, massive change, right? Like, we are this little bit of it, and it has taken so many of us working together in whatever ways we did to get our little piece. And the hope is that everybody is doing that, and then it's all sort of coming together, right? Like, that the bird's eye view is like the inside of a big clock or something. It's all the gears are working. Yeah, if you link to our website and folks go to that convening page, they'll also get that collective agenda that all the commissions built if
Oh,
they want
love
to get
that.
in on that,
Yes,
which also
yes.
includes the dates for the follow-up meetings. I do need women to understand they have a place in this. They have a role in this. Everybody has a job to do and a part of making the world better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great. I love talking to you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. So I want it to happen again.
Yeah, I would love that.
So check the show notes, everyone. Thanks again, Darcy. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
today.
you so much.
I want to extend my thanks once again to Darcy. Our conversation was both a joy and an honor. And it really brought to mind the words of writer and activist Adrienne Marie Brown. I believe that all organizing is science fiction, that we are shaping the future we long for and have not yet experienced. I hope this conversation leaves you feeling motivated as it did me. And please be sure to visit the show notes to learn more about the commission and to gain access to that invaluable report that Darcy mentioned. And lastly, I want to express gratitude to you for continually tuning in, or even if this was just a one-off listen for you. Today's episode is number 99 here on the main feed, which is like yowzas. And I'm committed to making it to at least episode 100, so I will be back, but I'm not sure when, because I'm taking off for a while to focus on some of my graduate work, which means that if you want more of the Deeper Pulse in the meantime, please consider checking out bonus content over on Patreon. I do release episodes there at least once a month, and I will be dropping something soon in the next week or so. So if you want to check that out, head over to patreon.com/the Deeper Pulse. I hope to see you over there, and bye for now.